Good evening and welcome to East Brandywine Township. Tonight we will be doing the Rouse Chamberlin conditional use application. I'm going to turn it over to our solicitor, Kristen Camp, and we'll begin the proceedings.
Thank you. This is a continuation. The first hearing was held on March 15th, and the second hearing was May 9th, and then the third hearing was June 7th. So we're here. The applicant is represented by Allison Zaro. She's going to continue. I think she has another witness to present, her traffic expert, and then she indicated that she might recall some other witnesses to clarify some issues that were raised. And then what we'll do is we'll turn it over to some of the parties that are here tonight. I believe they want to introduce evidence for themselves, and then we'll see where we are. I think the board typically is 10 o'clock a good time. So we'll see where we are, and if we need to pick a new date, we'll pick a new date. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Zaro.
Good evening, Allison Zaro on behalf of Rouse Chamberlin Limited. As Ms. Camp indicated, I'm ready to call my next witness, who is Chris Lowe, our traffic engineer.
Yes.
Chris, can you state your name and business address for the record, or maybe we won't bother with the business address since you're moving tomorrow?
Right. Christopher J. Williams, Exton, Pennsylvania.
And who's your current employer and what's your position with that employer?
McMahon Associates. I'm a vice president with the firm.
Okay. And Chris, are you a licensed professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Yes, I am.
And are you also, have you also testified before boards such as this one on numerous applications, including in this township?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and we do have Mr. Williams' CV marked as Exhibit A20. I'd like to offer him as an expert in traffic engineering.
Very familiar with Mr. Williams and his credentials. I think the board is as well, so I would recommend that he be admitted as an expert in traffic engineering. Okay?
Chris, are you familiar with this applicant's proposal of the subject property and the surrounding area?
Yes, I am.
And the board had marked as Exhibit A9 a review letter from the Township's traffic consultant, Andreas Heinrich, dated July 6, 2017. Have you seen that letter and have you reviewed it?
Yes, I have.
Although Mr. Heinrich, and I just want to walk you through the comments in that letter. So starting with number 1, although Mr. Heinrich noted that the site distance at the site access does not appear to be an issue, did you perform an analysis of site distance at the intersection of the proposed site driveway and Horseshoe Pike?
Yes, we did.
And can you explain to the board what the results of your analysis were?
Yes, I can. So as Ms. Zaro stated, the Township's traffic engineer did not cite any site distance concerns at the access, but we did prepare or conduct our own independent investigation. What we found is there are no site distance issues at the access intersection. The available site distance exceeds PennDOT's desirable site distance requirements, which is applicable in this case since Horseshoe Pike is a state road.
With respect to comment 2, just for the record, that relates to radii, and Mr. Daly already addressed that, just to keep everyone on the same page. So I'd like you to turn to comment 3. That pertains to trip generation. Can you explain briefly, I know we have residents here, what trip generation is and what trip generation tells us and how you utilize it as a traffic engineer?
Certainly. So traffic engineers use information published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, also known as ITE, which provides real data based on real actual traffic counts of similar land uses, including residential developments such as is the case, such as is proposed here. Based on that data from ITE, we are able to estimate the number of trips that will be generated by the development.
And did you perform a trip generation investigation for the proposed development?
Yes, we did. So the latest publication from ITE is the 10th edition of the Trip Generation Manual, which was published in the fall of 2017. Based on this data, we estimate the development will generate 110 daily trips, 8 trips during the weekday morning peak hour, that's 60 minutes in the morning, and then 11 trips during the weekday afternoon peak hour, and that's the peak 60 minutes in the evening rush hour.
And with respect to comment 3 in Mr. Heinrich's review letter, it's referring to a traffic impact fee. Can you explain what a traffic impact fee is generally and what its intended
Certainly. So the township has an Act 209 traffic impact fee ordinance, and this is an ordinance that is based on a lengthy traffic study that is prepared by a traffic engineer. The purpose of that study is to determine road improvements that are needed within the township, and then to develop an impact fee which is charged to new development, and that is a fee that is charged per trip generated by the development during the weekday afternoon peak hour. And the purpose of those collected funds are to finance improvements contained in the township's capital improvement plan.
So with respect to Mr. Heinrich's comment, he had a slightly higher trip generation number than you just explained for the site. Can you explain the discrepancy with respect to your finding and what he references in his letter?
Certainly. So Mr. Heinrich's letter was produced in July of 2017, which at that time was based on the 9th edition of the ITE Trip Generation Manual. As I stated before, ITE just recently updated its publication in the fall of 2017, so after the July review letter from Mr. Heinrich. So the data and the trip generation estimate in Mr. Heinrich's letter is based on older traffic data. At that time, when Mr. Heinrich did his review letter, the estimate was 13 trips during the weekday afternoon peak hour. However, now based on the latest edition of the ITE Trip Generation Manual, the number of trips that are estimated to be generated by this development based on updated traffic counts is 11 trips during the weekday afternoon peak hour.
Based on your view of the remainder of Mr. Heinrich's comments and all of the comments in the review letter, in fact, in your opinion, did Mr. Heinrich express any concerns about the proposed site access?
Mr. Heinrich expressed no comments or no concerns whatsoever with regard to the development and the access location or design in any way whatsoever.
And will the access design require review by PennDOT since 322 is a PennDOT?
Yes, so after we get through this process, a next step in the process will be to file a highway occupancy permit application to PennDOT, since Horseshoe Pike is a state road, and we will go through a design and review process with PennDOT in order to obtain a highway occupancy permit for the access intersection. That step has yet to occur, but we're obligated through that process to comply with all of PennDOT's regulations.
And PennDOT would not issue that permit if you were not able to demonstrate that there's safe and adequate access to the property?
Correct. PennDOT would not issue the permit for the access if they determined not to be appropriate, safe, and adequate in any way. We're confident that we will be issued a permit from PennDOT, but that process has yet to occur.
Thank you. I have no further questions for Mr. Williams.
Did you say 8 trips in the morning?
Correct. 8 trips in the morning peak hour, 11 trips in the afternoon peak hour.
All right, that just baffled that number. Peak hour being what, 7 to 8?
Peak hour is 60 minutes
So per peak hour.
per peak hour. In the peak hour, in the morning peak hour, the development would generate 8 trips. In the evening peak hour, it would generate 11 trips.
So, all right, that's what was confusing me. I was thinking,
Total trips.
right.
Yeah, these are not the total trips generated by the development. This is just during the peak 60
Got it.
minutes.
Mr. Heinrich's letter of July 6th has a comment about number 8, which says it's not clear how postal delivery of trash collection will be accomplished. Has that been addressed?
I think that it would be, answer that question, I believe it may have.
That's fine, if somebody else is going to address it. That was an open question for Mr. Heinrich's letter, so.
And what about comment 5, the truck turning plan and the fire department review?
Mr. Daly testified to that previously, and I have a couple follow-up questions for him. Based on
Okay. Does anybody else on the board have any questions for Mr. Williams?
No.
No.
Jobin, do you have any questions for him?
Yes, concerning school buses.
Pardon the interruption. Can I have you use a microphone? Let me grab you one.
We have a couple million viewers that follow us, and they like to hear us.
Okay. Question is related to traffic issues related to school bus stoppage for this development. Is there any study or related data that can simulate the extent of traffic issues caused by school bus stoppage?
That's not something we've studied, nor would we normally study. It's not an issue. I don't see it as being an issue. Buses would stop out in front of the development likely, pick up children, drop off children, as occurs with any other residential development, but I don't see that as being an issue.
So not in the development, they would stop on 322.
You know, that's a detail that would have to get resolved as we move further through the process, but at this point, we would anticipate school buses would stop out in front of the development along Route 322, which would be fine, it would be safe, considering all traffic has to stop when a school bus arrives. They would likely stop as they're traveling in a westbound direction, so they're on the property side of the road.
Touching upon his question, if, I guess, pickup and drop-off, I would be very interested to see, because now you're crossing 322 off a drop-off, if it would be, now that might be a better suited question for the school district, but
I would agree. I think it's an issue for the school district, but I've been involved in other similar applications, in similar roadway type settings, and typically what happens in that case is the school district would route their buses so that they are always oriented in the westbound direction, so as not to make children cross Route 322. But ultimately, that's not our decision. That's the decision of the school district.
Follow-up question is, in the traffic manual, is there any identification of trips, number of trips? Is that including or inclusive of school bus, trash collection, mail service?
So, well, mail service typically would occur off-peak, not during your rush hour periods. The estimates that I've given for traffic, so 8 trips in the morning and 11 trips in the evening, that's based on real actual counts of other similar developments. So to the extent other similar developments are also generating school bus traffic, they would be reflected in those numbers. What I've seen typically is school buses may overlap during the morning peak hour, but usually schools are departing in the afternoon before the evening rush hour, so they would occur outside of the peak hour in the evening.
Mr. Brown, do you have any questions for Mr. Williams?
I do. I didn't know if you, mine's going to take a while. I didn't know if you wanted to ask other Hopewell parties first.
It's up to you. Do you have any questions, Mr. Polly?
Not right now, I don't. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Mr.
All right,
Brown,
then
please proceed.
I do. Scott Brown, 102 Cherry Grove Lane. So I do want to say something to the board, just very briefly before I ask my questions, if I may, as a
This
statement.
is really just a time
Okay.
for questions to
Okay.
him. You'll
All
be
right.
given an
Fine.
opportunity to present whatever you want.
No problem, thank
Okay.
you. So, I did review your resume, and a couple of my questions were about ITE, and you have already spoken about ITE and PennDOT guidelines, so can we just assume that we agree that those are acceptable to
Yes.
refer to? Okay. So, can you tell me what the traffic volumes look like each day on Horseshoe Pike 322? Let's say from corner of 322 to the top of the hill at the next light. So light to light, the traffic volumes each day on 322 west and east.
Between Corner Catch and
Corner Catch, yes. between
Hopewell
Corner
Road.
Catch and Hopewell west to Bowling Green, Cropper's Market, that way. So one light each way.
So I do have count information from 2016 for the intersection of Route 322, Hopewell Road, and Bondsville Road. which shows that in the morning peak hour, oriented along 322 in a westbound direction, which would be passing in front of this site, we have a total peak hour flow of 368 vehicles in the westbound direction. And then in the eastbound direction, passing in front of this site, we have 648 vehicles in the morning peak hour today,
Sorry, can you define
as
what
of
that peak hour is?
2016. And then I'll just,
Yep,
and then in the evening peak hour, passing in front of the site, based on 2016 counts, in a westbound direction in the evening, we have 799 vehicles. And in an eastbound direction, passing in front of the site, there is 572 vehicles. And those are all hourly flows.
Okay, so just to educate me on the peak hour, I understand it's a 60-minute segment, an hour.
Correct.
What time of day is that peak hour? Is it 6 to 7, 7 to 8?
It's 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning and 5 to 6 in the evening.
Do you know what the current bus schedules are in East Brandywine? Does that include the bus schedules?
Bus, to the extent buses were captured in those counts, yes, it would include bus
Would
traffic.
include, okay. Can you tell me what the traffic volumes look like each day on Hopewell Road going north and south from Corner Catch to 322?
Again, I can tell you what the volumes are on Hopewell Road north of the intersection with 322.
Yes, I'm sorry, yeah, north to Corner Catch, and then from Corner Catch south to hitting 322.
I'm going to give you the volumes on Hopewell Road just north of the 322
That's
intersection, which
fair, yeah.
essentially is what
Yep,
you're
exactly.
asking for.
You
So
got it. Thank you.
in the morning peak hour, southbound Hopewell Road, 193 vehicles approaching the intersection, and 444 vehicles heading northbound leaving the intersection in the morning peak hour. And in the evening peak hour, there is 392 vehicles traveling southbound on Hopewell Road towards Route 322, and 191 vehicles oriented northbound on Hopewell Road traveling away from 322.
And can we do the same then, instead of, can I hit you with 3 and 4? Instead of, well, I'll do one at a time. The same is for Bondsville, so it's south of 322 on Bondsville Road.
So in the morning peak hour, traveling northbound on Bondsville Road towards 322, we have 398 vehicles. And southbound on Bondsville Road in the morning, leaving 322, there is 221 vehicles in the morning. In the evening peak hour, oriented northbound on Bondsville Road towards 322, there is 364 vehicles. And then traveling southbound on Bondsville Road, leaving 322, there is 334 vehicles oriented southbound on Bondsville Road away from 322.
And the last one is 322 northwest onto Corner Catch to Hopewell Road. So it would be the north and south traffic, evening, morning, from 322 up Corner Catch Road, which is the next road up east of us.
You want traffic volumes on Corner Catch Road?
The same exact, yeah, same volumes on Corner Catch to 322.
Yeah, I don't have Corner Catch volumes with me.
Okay. Fortunately, it's one of our most important and biggest concerns because that is one of the current shortcuts for traffic around this intersection. So I would like to get those somehow because I want to confirm the readings I have, which you've pretty much mind jive, so.
If I could, is this a question?
I would like, yes, I would like those, that information because.
I would object based on relevance. We're here about this intersection, the site access intersection, what the impact will be of this
All right, so that general data reflects the current flow of traffic during peak hours that use corner catch to bypass the current flow, high flow of traffic at Hopewell between now. It's only going to get worse by, where's your numbers? It's only going to get worse daily at peak times, weekday, peak hour, and daily. So I'd like to just
Well, it's
understand.
going to get worse by 8 vehicles, not even, less than 8 vehicles in the morning and less than 11 vehicles in the evening. Because
And-
not all of our traffic is going to use one road, it will distribute.
Right,
So
and
we're talking about very
so-
few vehicles.
Yes, and I'll get to that question in a minute. I guess I can do that now, but does your study take into consideration the other development that's going on right now? Does it take into consideration, there are other plans and other developments going in currently that the numbers you're giving me do not equate to the total numbers that I'm seeing and their numbers. So I'd like to have an expert explain to us how the other developments in the area, i.e. the townhomes south of us on Bowling, that's not Bollinger, that's on Bondsville, and the daycare.
And your study, real quick, just because this might answer his, your study was 2016, right?
Yes, I have his.
And it was
same.
actual counts.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not
he's not
giving
I have
you,
the
project-
actual, yes.
yeah, I'm not giving you a study, right? You asked what the existing traffic volumes are. I've told you what the existing traffic volumes are.
Understood. I'm asking if your study or you as an individual or have considered the other developments at all
So,
that's going on. I know you don't have to, you may not have to, I'm just asking if you have.
yeah, and I don't know that we have to. It wasn't requested in Mr. Heinrich's review letter. What I'll tell you is we did conduct a planning level analysis of the access intersection. We did it because it is something that PennDOT may ask for. And we applied our existing traffic counts that I've just stated. We applied background growth and we projected that information to the year 2021. So we added 5 years of growth at a rate of 2% per year. So we basically increased traffic volumes by 10% in our study of the access. So I'll say, yes, we have accounted for background growth.
Well, that's just typical, those are numbers that the ITE guideline provides, right?
No,
Or-
no. PennDOT's growth rate for roads like this in Chester County are 0.65% per year.
Right.
So we've increased traffic by 2% per year to be cautious, to be conservative in our planning, and also to account for other development traffic that may be generated, that which we know now and that which may be generated in the future.
But it doesn't include the specific data that may or may not have been collected for the other developments. We can agree to that.
We didn't account for the specific data, but I'm confident in the work that we've done using a conservative background growth factor that it does account for that traffic, and we have no concerns whatsoever about the operation of the access.
So so you followed, in doing your study and preparing for the study, post-initiation phase, following the ITE guidelines, was there a scoping meeting, a formal scoping meeting?
Not yet.
Okay. So I guess that would ask, my next question is answers as well. So not all aspects of the guidelines have been met so far to date?
No, that's not true.
Well, you haven't had the scoping meeting,
That's a PennDOT requirement.
but it's also listed in the ITE guidelines, so.
It's a PennDOT requirement.
But it is documented in the ITE guidelines as a requirement for traffic study.
I'm not sure, it's not referenced in the ITE guidelines, it's a PennDOT requirement in PennDOT's guidelines. So when we commence the PennDOT highway occupancy permit process, we will have a scoping, in fact, I doubt highly PennDOT will require a scoping meeting, but we will review our scope with PennDOT prior to submitting our HOP application.
And the township and the parties get a copy of that scoping meeting plan, correct? Or the
The township, it's sort of, it's completely outside of the conditional use process. We will copy the township on a scoping application to PennDOT.
Right, okay.
Correct.
But the minutes and the items discovered in that meeting do not have to go to the township or the parties?
They will go to the township.
All right.
And they'll be public records. You'll be able to
Right.
get copies of them, as PennDOT is a public agency.
And that process will start after this process.
All right. So can you explain the M950? The M950 for driveway safe distances?
Yes,
Would you be able to, I mean, I'm just trying to understand that too, but.
that is a form that is used to document site distance.
And is that part of what you've done in this traffic study?
We've measured site distance. The information that we've gathered in our site distance evaluation will be used in preparing the M950 form that will ultimately be submitted to PennDOT as part of the
Part of
HOP
it.
process, correct?
Again, it'll be public record, okay. Was your analysis, you've already said you've done, we have 1 hour numbers. Was there a 24-hour traffic assessment done?
I've provided daily traffic volumes for the development.
Right, those were, I believe, those were theoretical based on IT version 10, not 9, as you mentioned, but are they actuals?
No, we can only, actuals, we can only do theoretical at this point for the development because the development does not exist.
Okay, so what I'm asking is, was an assessment required of you, asked of you, or completed that takes into account an actual 24-hour period on the road?
Are you asking if we counted daily volumes on 322 today?
Yes, a formal 24 hours.
We did not. And if and I don't believe PennDOT, Township has not asked for it. I don't believe.
Understand.
PennDOT will ask for it.
No, that's fine. So the peak rush hour times that you have documented, or that we're assuming, if that's the right word, are 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning. There's one peak hour. There's not multiple peak hours. Is that correct?
One morning peak hour, one evening
okay.
peak hour.
All right, thank you for that. Do you have the figures on the East Brandywine population increases year over year?
No,
No? Okay. And that's related to traffic? Okay.
no,
all
it's
right.
not.
No, my question's related to traffic, like the
Okay.
growth of the number of cars per houses and, and you.
We don't use
You already
population
mentioned that
data.
you do a 10-year assessment or estimate for growth of traffic, correct?
We did a 5-year
5-year, I'm sorry,
projection.
which was, okay, 5-year projection. Okay. All right. You already answered those. What is the construction, does your study include the vehicles and the construction vehicles that are going to be utilizing 322?
No,
There's no assessment or anything taken into consideration the delays there?
no, it's not necessary.
Well, you said it's not necessary. We can agree to disagree. I think it is very necessary from a safety and traffic perspective. So that's
Well-
your opinion as an expert in engineering, it's not necessary.
Correct, and for the purposes of a traffic study that the township is interested in seeing and PennDOT is interested in seeing, we're asked to focus on what will the traffic generation be of the community after it's fully built out. We're not dealing with construction scenarios.
Right. So, and I'll apologize in advance for this, because there's going to be a lot of questions that you may not be able to answer then, but again, last time we were here, we had tabled these because they were relative to engineering of the traffic, and
If
it may
I-
have to go back to.
I will have the engineer testify again.
Sure.
So if there are things related to.
I know what to ask based on my novice, my layman's work, so you can tell me not applicable, and then I'll go on, if that's fair. I don't want to drag this on either, as much as I can, but I don't know what to ask you and what not to ask you. That's fair. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we know the entryway is a 90-degree access, correct?
That
It's not-
again will be an engineering.
Okay, all right. All right, same with cars entering and exiting, it's probably the same. So you're simply traffic study only. All right, so I'm gonna make this real easy. If I could have 30 seconds to look.
While you're doing that, while you're looking that up, Scott, I have a question. Was there a specific date? Maybe you said it, and I apologize, I didn't hear. You did your study, was there a specific date that it was done? I know you said peak hours.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm asking is because school buses may not be running during the summer if it was done
Correct.
during the summer or something, that's all.
Right, great question. Our counts were conducted in October.
Okay.
Of 2016.
Correct.
So, one of the items I have for PennDOT, I believe we're using the same information because what I looked up looked similar to what you had, but I'm using PennDOT and ITMS. Is that a reasonable?
I'm familiar with
Source?
that resource. That's a resource that I use often. So the data I'm citing is based on actual counts that our office conducted.
Okay. So is it safe for me to refer, since some of these are actually jiving, is it safe for me to use this as a form of reliable data, ITMS and PennDOT's study?
I believe it is. I
Okay.
use it in
I
other
want to make sure
situations.
so I'm able to talk,
Yes.
accurately. Okay. Okay. I think, actually, I don't know if this is you or not. In regarding certain codes, I've written down code 441.b, specifically sections F, G, and H, those items in the code. Is that something that you would be able to speak to?
If I could object, this is a conditional use hearing, it's about the conditional use criteria. If
Yes.
there's something related to PennDOT statute, as Mr. Williams testified, that would be addressed as part of the PennDOT.
Yeah, I'm not sure which code you're talking about, if it's a
Well,
state
I guess it
statute.
might be engineering. I wanted to ask and see if they're following the guidelines.
But those are PennDOT guidelines you're referring to?
They are. I
Okay,
guess they
yeah,
are.
that, and I would agree with Mrs. Zarro that this board doesn't have jurisdiction over the PennDOT regulations, the PennDOT guidelines. It will be a requirement that they obtain an HOP for their access driveway. And the township can participate in that process, but that would only happen after they get their conditional use and they're proceeding to a land development.
Okay.
And,
So-
and you as a landowner have the right to participate in that proceeding as well.
The PennDOT proceeding.
You do.
Okay.
You can intervene in that.
Thank
I
you.
don't know what the standing requirements are, but I know that private parties can intervene in that process.
Okay. I hate the word intervene. I could be a party to it?
Yes.
Okay. thank
Yep.
you. All right. So then, those are all of my questions. Thank you
thank
very
you.
much.
Okay.
If I could just ask Mr. Williams one follow-up question. Just to reiterate, based on the results of your analysis, what did you determine the site access would operate at in terms of the level of service?
Right, so we did conduct traffic analysis and evaluation of the operations of the access intersection, and I'm sure this board has heard traffic engineers testify before. The term level of service is the standard by which we evaluate the operations of any intersection, and what that is it's a measure of the delay that would be experienced at an intersection. And then based on that delay, the intersection is assigned a letter grade, or the individual movements at the intersection are assigned a letter grade, A, B, C, D, E, F. Whereas an F movement or an F intersection is experiencing high delay. Anything below F is experiencing lower levels of delay. Based on our evaluation of the access, the intersection will operate in the future at overall level of service A during the morning rush hour and the evening rush hour. And the movements entering the access would also operate at a level of service A. The movements exiting the access would operate at a level of service C in the morning and a level of service D in the afternoon, which are both above and meet PennDOT's acceptable level of service criteria.
In terms of your analysis, one final question. You did the study assuming that there would be no traffic necessarily going through the Guthrie'sville Plaza, even though that access connection is shown.
That is correct. We assumed all of the traffic generated by this development will be using the access, the new access serving the development. We did not assume any of the traffic would cut through the Guthrie'sville Plaza connection.
And based on your analysis, that was a conservative way to analyze.
That is correct.
I do have three more I missed that you may be able to answer. I'm sorry. Do you know, or is your study included, or can you answer, how many cars will it take to back up traffic heading east on Horseshoe Pike, trying to make a left into the complex, or traffic, into the development?
Not sure I understand the question.
So does the study include the number of cars or the distance of traffic impact heading east up the hill for the cars trying to make a left into the complex off of 322?
So the movement in question would be for a vehicle heading eastbound on 322, turning left into the development. And based on the level of service, the anticipated queue for that left turn movement is very low. It's approximately one vehicle. I don't anticipate there would be any queuing concerns or condition that would cause traffic to back up as you travel west along 322.
Even during peak hours?
That is correct.
Are you aware that currently, within multiple peak hours, and the gentleman that had pictures isn't here, but I'm pretty sure people here can attest, traffic backs up currently well up to the hill for multiple hours, and easily to the hardware store regularly throughout the
Yeah,
day.
and I understand that, and really, that's no different than the condition that would exist today if a vehicle were turning left into Guthrie'sville Plaza or turning left into the hardware store. This is common in suburban settings, on high-volume corridors. This is something we see all the time, and frankly, it works because traffic, the expression we use is courtesy gaps, and when there is a queue of vehicles backed up from a traffic signal, drivers allow a courtesy gap to allow traffic to turn into the side street, and we see that today, and it's because that condition exists today, you don't have the backup from the hardware store causing a backup all the way to the Guthrie'sville intersection, and I see this development being no different.
Okay. Appreciate it. That's it.
Thank you.
You answered 2 and 3.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Question, you said that October 2016 data was the traffic study. What is the shelf life of a typical study?
PennDOT would accept, well, so the study was, the volumes were updated to current 2018 conditions, but the counts were originally conducted in 2016. But we adjusted the data to reflect current conditions, and then in fact, we projected it even further to the year 2021. But to answer your question, PennDOT would accept traffic data that is 2 to 3 years old. They still consider it to be fresh traffic data. So this traffic data is still acceptable in the eyes of PennDOT as a reviewing agency. So it meets the shelf life test.
Right. You said the data is from 2016, but you adjusted it to 2018.
Correct. We increased the volumes. Right? We added a growth factor to increase it, to project it forward.
So it's not actual, the numbers you reflected was actual data for 2016.
Correct. The counts I cited were the actual raw counts conducted in 2016. We then took those counts, we conducted a traffic study of the access intersection, and we projected those counts forward, actually to the year 2021, which is the anticipated build-out year of this development.
But that analysis was only to determine the level of service of the access driveway.
That is correct.
Right.
So the counts you shared are not
Nope.
accurate as of today, or?
The counts I shared were accurate as of October 2016.
Yeah, he's giving an analysis of what the level of service would be for the proposed access driveway. And to do that, he used the counts in 2016 and then added the growth factors that PennDOT requires and then came up with a level of service.
Correct.
And just so you understand, the townships had their own traffic expert analyze all of this. And that's what the letter that Mrs. Zara started with. If Mr. Heinrich, who works for the township, didn't agree with the way they conducted their methodology or took issue with the results, he would have put that in his letter of B, which is marked B9. So as far as the township traffic expert's concerned, they did their studies based on the way a traffic expert is supposed to conduct these studies.
Right, that is my concern. Obviously, the number of developments and projects that have completed since 2016 has a much greater impact on that number, at least I believe. than what is the actuals from October of 2016.
And that's why he said that he had to add the growth factor. Yeah.
Right, but given that that growth factor is a approximation or used at a percentage, it is not actuals for what we experience today.
I've done a lot of traffic studies in this township for a variety of developments, and I feel very confident that what we've done in this study is more than appropriate and conservative for planning purposes to evaluate this access. And again, we've projected the traffic counts even further to the year 2021.
My other question is related to use of, or parking, because of the nature of development, and I believe it's 2 parking spaces that it's been assigned outside of private parking. What is your impact of parking along the 322 as caused by this project?
We don't anticipate there to be any parking along 322.
Can you explain that a bit further? There's 15 townhomes being built with only 2 additional spaces outside of the personal driveways. It is unreasonable to think that, at least in my opinion, that there will not be any parking impact on 322.
That's outside of, I mean, Mr. Williams did not study parking. The parking is addressed by our civil engineers.
Yeah, and he testified about that at the last meeting. We had a discussion about that. The testimony was that the parking that they've provided meets the code, so. I mean, I think she's going to call Mr. Daly again if you want to ask him other questions about that. But technically, your questions of this witness have to relate to the direct questions that she brought out. Is there any other party that wishes to ask Mr. Williams a question?
Sure.
Please identify yourself.
Sure. Scott Paulus, 108 Cherry Grove Lane. Are you able to speak to the increase percentage-wise of volume of traffic on 322 in general in like the last 5 years?
No,
You don't know?
not offhand. I mean, I have that information. I don't have it offhand.
Could you extrapolate a little bit on the numbers of 8 trips in the morning, 11 trips in the afternoon at peak? I think it was 7:30 to 8:30, and what was he, 4:30, 5:30?
5 to 6.
5 to 6. You said they were based on a comparable, living, whatever, town, complex. Is there an actual complex, or is it a mix of facilities? Can you explain?
So the ITE data is based on a large collection of actual traffic counts of other similar land uses. So it's not based on one other development or one other count. It's based on many, many counts at other similar developments. So it's very reliable data given the amount of data that we're basing these projections on.
So do those algorithms take into account the road that they're located on? For instance, like if you took this townhome project and put it in the middle of the country, it'd be a lot different than putting it on Route 30.
No, not for the traffic that the development generates. So the number of units, the number of townhouse units that are proposed here will generate 8 trips in the morning rush hour, 11 trips in the evening rush hour. That's independent of the roadway in which it's located. It's, what causes traffic to be generated by a residential community. It's kids going to school, it's parents going to work. Those conditions would exist in a townhouse community, whether it's located in East Brandywine or whether it was located in central Pennsylvania. These are the projections that we use, and these are the projections really that we're required to use. These are the rules that we're required to follow.
So between 7:30 and 8:30, I mean, it's a 15 townhome project. There's, I believe, 2 spots in the driveway, 1 in the garage. So possibility of 45 cars, if everyone had 3 cars. They're projected that only 8 trips are going to leave. There's only 8 people going to work at prime. I mean, it just seems really low to me. I mean, and then secondly, you had mentioned that at peak time in the afternoon, only 1 vehicle would turn left. which seems,
No, I didn't say only one vehicle would turn left. The queue, so the,
this is when you were discussing level of service.
no, I understand.
Yeah.
So the queue, or the backup of left vehicles waiting to turn left into the development at any one time is only going to be one vehicle at any one time waiting to turn left into the development. There are more than one vehicle, there's more than one vehicle turning left into the development, but they're spaced over the course of 60 minutes. So you're not going to have a queue of a high volume of vehicles turning left into the development.
Well, it just takes one to back up traffic,
Okay?
right? Because, I mean, I see 322 from my yard. I see the traffic for hours. I mean, both ways. So, has there been any study as far as the impact of how long a car has to sit there to wait to go left before traffic would back up to the light? Because it's not a very long distance between where the entry point would be and the stoplight.
Well, it's several hundred feet. I mean, it's longer than maybe, it's a safe distance, in my opinion. It's a considerable distance from the intersection. So the estimated delay for a vehicle waiting to turn left from Route 322, turning left into the community, that estimate of delay is only 10 seconds or less. So that queue for that left turn vehicle will not create a problem that would cause traffic to back up to the traffic signal. The same way that a vehicle turning left into the hardware store today does not cause a backup to the traffic signal. It's no different than what occurs today on either side of this development.
Thank you.
So you're going to have to come forward and say your name again. Are you one of the parties?
Yes.
Please state your name.
I am Raj Mahamiraj, 110 Cherry Grove Lane. I have just one question and one counter argument for what you stated. I've been driving my daughter to Downingtown West for the past 10 years. In 2016, I was able to reach from Hopewell Community to Downingtown East and West, which is the middle school and the high school you have next to each other. I could reach there in 8 minutes. Now, 2018, it takes me 35 minutes to reach from here to there. That is not in your projection. I don't think so you could have projected that. So what was 8 minutes has become 35 minutes now for me to get. So I am driving around back roads to get there.
Wait, can you go
Very
talk
loud and very
away from it a little
fast.
bit?
I'm sorry?
Hold it like
Talking
8 inches
very
away.
loud and very fast. Can you hold the microphone further away and
Louder is
talk
good, right?
Slower.
It's more
She needs-
clearer.
She needs to take every word down.
Okay.
If you look at her, it will help you talk slower.
Okay, all right, that's good. I will do that. So do you want me to repeat it from the beginning? You're good? All right. That's one thing. So that projection never went from 8 minutes to 38 minutes. It never went.
Sir,
Even
this
this
is
morning,
this is
it
supposed
happened.
to be, sir, this has to be a question. This
No,
is not-
I would like to answer to what he said first, because he said it's been projected. So I'm saying the projection is not correct. That's one thing. The second thing is that it is. I'm saying, can you substantiate how it, from 8 minutes, have you estimated, now your projection shows 38 minutes?
I mean, Mr. Williamson testified.
That's your
No,
opinion.
this is my personal experience on everyday basis. It's not a thing. Okay, that's one thing. All right. Okay, the second question I have is, in 2016, there was no Applecross new townhouses which opened up that has 75 homes right now. By the end of 2019 March, they're going to complete 75 houses here. Was that taken into consideration, please?
It was because so typical PennDOT growth rate for situations like this is 0.65% per year. We used a 2% per year growth rate for 5 years. So we've increased traffic by 10%, which is more than and above what PennDOT would require for a background traffic, for a background traffic growth estimate. So the reason we used a higher growth estimate was to account for just general regional growth, but also to account for local growth that is occurring in East Brandywine, because we are well aware that there are other developments occurring in this township.
But Pulte Homes did not announce that the 75 homes are opening up in 2016. They opened up only now.
I think that Mr. Williams answered this question.
The only thing I'll offer to that is, even if we increased our growth rate even higher, the access intersection is operating at a level of service A. We could increase the growth factor even higher. This intersection is still going to operate at acceptable levels of service. The intersection just does not generate a lot of traffic. And I don't see any scenario by which this intersection is not going to operate at acceptable levels of service, thereby meeting the criteria that PennDOT would hold us to. So I understand there's traffic growth that's occurring, but looking at the traffic generated by this development and the impact of this development, this access intersection operates at acceptable levels of service, and it operates safely.
One more quick question. And by the way, I'll take the Raj traffic study any day. I mean, I'm just, because he lives it every day and he drives it, so I'll take that over projections. What, for the level of service, what is you've used the phrase acceptable by PennDOT standards, and they're ranked A through F. Is there an actual E ranking, or is it just A, B, C, D, F?
No, A, B, C, D, E, F.
So what's deemed unacceptable?
Level of service F is unacceptable.
So out of the whole range, only one letter is unacceptable? So
So-
anything above an F is acceptable?
So, and I forget the delay threshold. Level of service F is a delay that I believe is either 60 seconds or greater or 80 seconds or greater. I don't remember the exact threshold. Point being is any delay that's below that threshold would be an E, D, C, B, or A. And at those levels of delay, PennDOT considers it acceptable. But once you hit an F, it just becomes sort of a worse degree of F.
Right, so anything better than an F is acceptable. Because I know in the afternoon you had mentioned that it's a D coming one direction.
Exiting the development, we're estimating the level of service to be a D.
Okay, but that's anything that's not an F is acceptable.
Correct.
Okay. Just, I mean, it seems like a silly scale, but. All right, thank you.
Anything further from the parties? Okay. Do you want to call your other witness?
I'd like to recall Mr. Daly.
He was sworn at the last hearing. You can still testify under oath, Mr. Daly.
Mr. Daly, at the last hearing, there were several questions about water and sewer easements on the property, as well as relocated water and sewer easements. And I'd like to walk through that with you again, as we now have some follow-up information. Mr. Penders will testify to some of that, but just for clarity, I know there were a lot of questions about that. So referring to Exhibit A5, which is the conditional use plan, can you identify the location of the existing water and sewer easements on the property? Let's start with water.
Okay, right now, the water line easement is combined with the sanitary sewer easement coming from the northeast corner of the parcel and working its way south through this combined 40-foot easement. And the 40-foot easement continues all the way down to Horseshoe Pike along with the water line. And the sanitary line ends up branching off along the southern portion of the site, continues west in a separate 30-foot sanitary easement.
And is the aqua water easement in and of itself a 20-foot wide easement?
Yes, it is.
And can you point out where that water easement would be relocated on the property?
Yes, the water line, the new water line easement would branch off at the northeast corner of the property, continue to the west, go between units 11 and 12 into the proposed road, where it'll spread out throughout the branches of the proposed road until it ultimately ties back down into Horseshoe Pike down here in the southeast corner of the property.
Is Aqua the successor to Philadelphia Suburban Water Company, to the best of your knowledge, and are they the beneficiary of the current easement?
Yes,
And would they be the beneficiary of the new easement?
they would.
What is the size of the water main in Horseshoe Pike?
The water main in Horseshoe Pike is 12 inches.
And then when it comes onto the site, what is the size of the water main?
It's 8 inches.
And does that currently serve the Hopewell development?
It does.
And as part of this development, would the applicant, if needed, based on Aqua's direction, upsize the water main at its cost to serve the development, and would it also continue to serve?
Yes.
With respect to the sewer easement, is the township the current beneficiary of the sewer easement on the property?
It is.
And have you consulted with the municipal authority for the township and confirmed that they would be the beneficiary of the new easement on the property?
Yes.
And what is the size of the main on the property today?
The size of the main on the property today is 8 inches.
And would the applicant again be responsible for any upsizing that would be required by the municipal authority in order to serve both the Hopewell development and this development?
Yes.
Finally, there are a couple of questions about truck turning, which I'd like you to turn to next. And I will have Mr. Penders address some of the other issues about encroachments in the new easement areas. The applicant had those conversations, so there will be more to come. I just wanted to get the technical details on the record. At the last hearing, there were several questions regarding the fire truck turning and maneuverability through the site. Turning to Exhibit 18, which was marked at the last hearing, is that a truck turning plan that you had prepared based on information provided by the fire company for the township?
Yes.
And can you explain again what that exhibit demonstrates?
So this exhibit is demonstrating that the fire truck specifications, which were provided by the township, can safely and adequately circulate throughout the site and can access all of the proposed 15 units.
Since the last hearing, has the applicant team verified that you utilize the largest fire truck that the fire company uses when you prepare this truck turning?
We did.
And finally, there have been some questions about parking related to the development. Just to reiterate, how many parking spaces are required per dwelling unit for this project?
1.5 spaces per dwelling unit are required. Since we're proposing 15 units, we are required to provide 23 spaces.
And how many off-street parking spaces are proposed directly related or on each unit?
We're proposing about 49 parking spaces.
And then, but if we were being very conservative and we said, okay, you only get one spot in the driveway and one spot in the garage, would that equate to 30 spaces?
It would, which would meet the requirement.
Okay. And then are there 4 additional off-street parking spaces shown on the plan that are separate from any townhouse dwelling units?
Yes,
And with respect to those spaces, those are additional spaces that would not be required by ordinance, is that correct?
that's correct.
And what did you size those spaces on Exhibit A5, the conditional use plan?
Those spaces have dimensions of 9 feet by 18 feet, which is less than the requirement of 10 by 20. However, if we upsize those to 10 by 20s, we would lose a space, and we would have 3 additional parking spaces in that area. And we feel that it would be better to have that additional space at a smaller size.
And does the ordinance allow the Board of Supervisors to actually reduce a certain percentage, and this would be of required, and this is additional, parking for certain types of uses, like a multifamily use, to allow for, quote, small car parking on the property?
Yes,
And would that small car parking dimension be as small as 8 feet by 16?
that's correct.
And so these 4 spaces that are proposed are actually bigger than that small car parking, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I have no further questions for Mr. Neal.
Planning board,
I have none.
anything?
Well, I guess one. You said 49 spaces, right, in the beginning that you accounted for. maybe are they wrong, 30 with the driveways. I know you had the 3 other, did you have off-street parking in front of some?
49 would include those 9 by 18 spaces that we just described, along with the 1 space in the garage and 2 spaces in the driveway.
Oh, 2 spaces in the driveway, okay.
But to meet the actual code, we're proposing 30 spaces with 15 in the garage and 15 in the driveways, which is what I have shown on my plan.
Jason, any questions?
With this kind of design, shouldn't it be recommended to have a setback with a gross dwelling density of 6 or greater to be 32 foot rather than 30? Based on the Guthersville manual?
Say that again?
The setbacks between buildings should be 32 foot because this plan depicts more than 6 dwellings.
Yeah, we're proposing 30 feet based off of the TND 1 requirements in the zoning ordinance.
I thought that the Guthersville Village manual stated 32 foot. If it's 6 dwellings or less, it would be 30 foot.
I don't recall that section, that's why I'm not speak to that.
What is the typical
30
off-street
feet is
parking
J.
dimension?
Typical?
I guess the design standard, the criteria.
The lowest I've seen, you mean size-wise?
Yeah,
The lowest I've seen is 9 by 18s,
9 by 18. Is ours, what is our ordinance? Is 10 by 18?
10 by
10
20.
by 20.
20 for off-street?
Yeah, but as Ms. Ara said, there's sections that allow a board to modify them in certain circumstances, to modify the dimension size in certain circumstances. But the 30 meet the 10 by 20. The 30 spaces that you spoke about meet the 10 by 20.
Well, the ordinance isn't very clear on dimensions for a garage space. So we're just counting the garage space, and then we are showing a 10 by 22-foot dimensional area in the driveway, which would meet the ordinance.
I had thought that last hearing, it was concluded that a vehicle inside a garage doesn't count as off-street because it has to be able to exit the home free, clear, without another vehicle in the way.
On the code.
I thought John mentioned that.
I don't remember that.
I had to
I'll
check.
send-
For some reason, it's ringing in my ear, for some reason. Check.
I have that as well.
Yeah, it wasn't raised as an issue by the zoning officer or the Panoni, the civil engineer, but we can take a look at that. And the planning commission, I don't think raised it as an issue.
They exist in other developments in the township as well.
Do any of the parties have any follow-up relating to Mr. Daly's testimony?
No, I'm not going. All right. Good. All right. Yes, I have, but I have a mic right here. Okay, so some of the questions that had been tabled from last time, because we thought they were for the traffic engineer. Do you know what the current site distance requirements are for PennDOT? Well, I'm assuming you know what the minimum site distance are for PennDOT. Do you have the figures that, based on the slope and the grade of 322 and the proposed plan with the wall, what those safe site distances are? in your plan?
I would defer that question to Mr. Williams, traffic engineer.
Okay. I'm not frustrated, I'm laughing. Okay.
We were asking about the angle of the driveway. That was a question for Mr. Daly, but Mr. Williams will answer the safe site distance.
Okay.
And I understand, we'll just have.
So that was going back to my F, G, and E okay, sorry. So, site distance, 2-lane road is what I'm referring to. Measuring back 10 feet from the edge of the pavement, what are the
Do I have a
current
question?
planned site distances? Exiting left and right, and entering left and right, for both regular vehicles, left-turning vehicles, obviously, and buses. So I don't need to know the guideline, I'm sorry, let me rephrase it. I know, I have the guidelines here. I'm asking what the planned site distances are, based on the slope, current grade of 322, going east and west, with the wall.
So the wall sits about 20 feet back from the edge of Route 322,
20 feet, okay.
roughly. Site distance is measured from a distance 10 feet back from the edge of 322. So the wall is not an obstruction for site distance purposes.
Okay, thank you.
And the available site distance exceeds PennDOT's requirements.
Exceeds the requirements.
Correct.
Do you have the numbers?
The requirements or the availables?
No, the availables.
So we measured, looking to the left, 700 feet, and looking to the right, 900 feet.
Okay. And the grade, do you know if the grade is lower or higher, greater or lesser than 3%?
It's
Or what is
it's
the
less than 3%. I don't know the grade off. It's less than 3%.
Less than 3%, okay.
It's
So
not-
that
So I
includes
know
the
what
mul-
you're speaking to.
Yeah,
And you've done some good research, but it's not going to affect the desirable site distance requirements.
including school buses. Same site distances for school buses now, though. Assuming school buses go in, because we don't know that yet.
We don't know that yet.
So let's assume that the school buses are going in. So you're saying 700 feet, 900 feet.
So
That would
the
then-
available site, what I can tell you is that the available site distance will also satisfy for school buses and trucks.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Good question.
Any other parties? Or-
Oh, yeah, I can pretty much guarantee that I don't have any more traffic questions on that. Okay, but thank you. Does your plan include or consider the need, and this may be a PennDOT decision, but does the plan include, take into consideration, no left turn lane currently? Or left turn lane, okay, that's you. It's all right.
So we did take a look at whether the access would require turning lanes, and PennDOT has criteria on when turning lanes are required, and based on the low volume of traffic generated by this development, does not warrant turning lanes based on PennDOT's criteria.
And would you say the same then for requirement of widening the road?
Correct.
Would you say the same for, I'm actually doing your job and I don't want to do it. Would you say the same for improving the light? Is that something you would talk about? Left turn lanes and light times? Would that be something that,
No, I don't believe so.
okay.
Can I just interrupt for a second? That's all something that PennDOT,
That's why,
if
yeah.
it was a requirement, would have you analyze. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
these are
that-
really detailed questions that we would get into during the HOP process.
Well, I want to
Because
I
the township
apologize.
doesn't have jurisdiction over that, given it's a state road.
understand. Just so everyone understands clear, I'm considering this part of conditional approval. I don't know all the details that go into it, so I would like them to be discussed in part of record so that we understand
Right, so,
what can be affected, is affected, and what isn't.
right, and I wanted to do that, but I didn't want you to take it as me saying that what you're saying isn't relevant. I wanted you to understand that in this application, so a conditional use means that there's been a legislative determination that a multifamily development in this district is appropriate.
Yep.
So a prior board of supervisors that adopted this ordinance determined that this should be TND1
Yep.
and said that multifamily dwellings are permitted in that district. And that means that there was a decision that that use is appropriate.
Yep.
So and there's nothing in the TND standards, and there's nothing in the general conditional use standards that speak to or give specific criteria that an applicant must meet with respect to traffic. I actually looked at that because when we were asking your questions, I thought, do they meet their standards? So I went and looked at what the conditional use standards were. You had asked a question about levels of service.
Right.
There's nothing in the zoning criteria or conditional use criteria that hold them to any standard with respect to a level of service.
Understood.
So the burden for them is meet the ordinance. Well, there's nothing in the ordinance that's specific to it. The burden for objectors is to show that this particular multifamily development, based on traffic and based on expert traffic reports, is going to create a more detrimental impact than you would ordinarily see from 15 townhomes. God bless you. So it's a pretty high burden to show, this particular 15-home multifamily development, something about it, it's going to create more of a harmful impact than what you would ordinarily see from 15 townhomes. That's what the burden is.
So
So,
then-
but that's not to say that when PennDOT, that's just the conditional use part of it, okay? If they get the zoning approval, they still have to go to PennDOT. And some of the things that you're talking about, as far as other things they'd have to analyze, that's gonna be in PennDOT's jurisdiction as to whether they're gonna require that.
Great.
It's not likely, given the magnitude of this development and just my experience.
Understood.
Seeing these types of developments, the Pulte development up the road, sure, all the things you just asked had to be studied because of the level of, and the intensity of the development. I don't think you're gonna see that here,
Right.
but that's not something the township can control.
Okay. I guess then the rest of my comments or questions would be covered in my remarks,
Okay,
as myself and proxy of other people.
sure. Okay, let's go back to Mr. Daly. Does anybody have questions on anything Mr. Daly brought out, either at the last hearing or tonight? His questions tonight?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Actually, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I can't see, what is the width, I'm sure you said it already, but what's the width of the roadway between the
Between the units.
units?
Between units 7 through 11 and 1 through 6,
Yes,
20 feet.
20 feet, is that 'cause to have on-street parking, doesn't the roadway have to be at least 24 foot wide to be considered?
The width we have shown here does comply with the ordinance, and Mr. Heinrich agreed. He did not comment on the.
Are you proposing on-street parking?
Yeah, there's 4 parking spaces?
Where?
Right to the north of 1 through 6?
We're talking about on-street parking. I would assume we'd be talking about parallel parking versus those spaces are off that
It's an
20
old
feet of
plan.
width. Oh, is
But
that a
that's
different
on the
plan?
s-
Oh, you're looking at an
This
older
must be an
plan.
old plan.
Yes.
I don't know.
Okay.
So I'm asking that. Does
Our
your-
original
Could be the case.
submission.
Yes, now it makes sense what
Maybe
you're
is
asking.
there another
Okay.
one I'm,
We're looking, if you look at Exhibit A5, that's what we're proposing now, and that eliminated the parallel parking spaces.
Well, I wish I'd known that about an hour ago.
Sorry.
No, you guys have
I
the
don't
board
even, I don't even
exhibits. You
see it though, I don't have A5.
You have, yeah, you're looking at board exhibits. This is A5. So this is the street.
We had eliminated those.
Can you
as
put
I'll throw
A5
this- I'll
up? Do
throw
you
this
have
away.
A5 that you can put up for him,
I
please?
can't read this.
Yeah, we have it on the other.
This is A5.
Yes, A5 is up. I know it might be a little faint, that's why I wanted to point out the hard copy of it.
So my question is, are you proposing any on-street parking on a 20-foot wide driveway?
No.
Okay, thank you. And would you be willing to accept a condition in your homeowner's declaration that there will not be parking permitted on that road? If that's what the board wanted, I'm not suggesting it is, but,
Mr. Penders said yes, he's
Okay.
not next to a microphone.
I can't really see this. Is there like another plan laying around?
you can have mine if you want. You can look at it. Do you have any extra A5s?
I do, I actually have an extra set of exhibits, if you would like one.
I'm getting tired of passing.
This is mine, I've memorized.
Thank you.
So, while he's looking, can I ask a question?
Sure.
All right, so, yeah, just to regroup, or to reiterate, the road has to be 24 feet wide, correct? The plan shows, this plan shows the minimum dimensions required for the roads, correct?
I don't know if the 24-foot was a minimum requirement, however, it was asked by the traffic engineer, the township's traffic engineer, to be
Okay.
24 feet.
I couldn't remember if it was that request or also because of the fire department. The plan for the fire department truck turning
Fire street.
required that to be 24 feet. But, so this plan that's up, A5 has, because I can't read it on either one, does show the 24 feet wide, 24-foot wide, okay. All right, thank you. And that offset of 30 or 32 feet, if the edge of the road is to the back of the townhouse, or the back of the proposed homes, is that considered in that offset? So that 20 feet from edge of road to back of townhouses, first set of townhouses, that's only 20 feet. That's within that 30-foot requirement, correct?